You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Latest imagery of Hurricane Dorian. We return again. It is 7 p.m. on the US East Coast. Midnight here at Force 13 HQ. And we are monitoring this very dangerous storm, which has winds of 150 miles per hour. National Hurricane Center's estimate pressure 945. We're going with 942, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Hurricane warning in effect for the northwestern Bahamas, excluding Andros Island. A hurricane watch is in effect for Andros Island itself, and a tropical storm watch was issued at 5 p.m. for Deerfield Beach to Sebastian Inlet. My name is Nathan Foy. Joining me again this hour is the team, which consists of David, Orlando, Sam, Ryan, and Justin. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Oh, Nathan.
Nice to see you all again. Any more analysis? Well, Ryan, we've not heard much from you recently. What is your take on the storm right now? It's playing games with us.
Yeah, it certainly is, but I think Recon is going in there to find out what is really happening.
Once and for all.
Once and for all.
Yes.
Yep.
We'll know soon. Hopefully this hour.
Yeah.
So, just to read out some of the chances for tropical storm force winds, I guess we could do that just now as well. Interestingly, even as far as Washington DC now, 3% chance of tropical storm force winds from this thing. 6% at Cape Henlopen, I think it is. 8% at Ocean City in Maryland. Is that right? Yeah. 4% at Charlottesville. Richmond, Virginia, 8%. Danville, 9%. Norfolk, Virginia, 12%. Elizabeth City, 19%. Greensboro, North Carolina, 11%. Raleigh, 17%. Rocky Mount, 21%. Cape Hatteras, 40%. Fayetteville, 30%. Charlotte, 13%. Cherry Point, 39%. New River, 50%. Morehead City, 51%. Surf City, 47%. Wilmington 48, Bald Head Island 62, Florence, South Carolina 38, Columbia 28, Little River 52, Myrtle Beach 64, Georgetown 58, Charleston 61, Beaufort 58, Atlanta, Georgia 5% chance of tropical storm force winds there, Augusta 25, Savannah 55, Kings Bay 64, Waycross 41, Mayport, Florida 81, Jacksonville 60%, Gainesville 45, Daytona Beach still at 73, The Villages 49, Orlando 65 now, Cocoa Beach 91, still very likely there, Patrick Air Force Base 80, Fort Pierce 94, West Palm Beach 91, Fort Lauderdale 80, Miami is still at 43% chance for tropical storm force winds, Homestead 33, Marathon 26, Key West 16, Naples 24, Fort Myers 28, Venice 26, Tampa 33, Cedar Key 42, Tallahassee 14, St. Mark's 15. And just for reference, Grand Bahama 99% chance, 72% chance of hurricane conditions, and New Providence is at 79% for tropical storm force winds. Andros is at 31. So that's all of the wind speed probabilities and those numbers appearing on the bottom of your screen as well. Strat's also joined us again this hour. Strat?
Hello.
Good evening to you again. We're continuing to watch this storm, and it's still, well, the National Hurricane Center said it would fluctuate, and I guess that is what it is doing right now.
Yeah, because some of that convection rain since last year an hour ago has kind of faded off a bit. But then again, there's a new burst trying to form on the western eye wall again at the same time. You know, it's why we say we got to wait for trends before, you know, jumping the train to certain conclusions to say, you know, oh, is this a category 5 or whatever? Because, you know, with that initial burst of convection that was looking really powerful, held itself together for 3-4 hours, and Recon came in and said stuff like that. Sure, you can make the argument, but Recon isn't there yet, and the initial convection burst has kind of faded off a bit.
Quite
So you need to see if
exasperating.
stuff like that redevelops. Yeah.
Because I was convinced at one point last hour it was Nightwall replacement cycle beginning, and now we don't know. We will find out with Recon very soon. Those planes can't go in there soon enough.
It was the same thing. I thought that maybe we were starting to see concentric eye walls form because of the convection loops kind of forming around each other, and it looks like that just isn't the case right now. But we could be proven wrong again in less than an hour when reconnaissance gets our first data passes. Pretty shocking to say the least. You know, just the development. Actually, breaking on that, one of the reconnaissance planes is about to do a southwest to northeast eye pass.
Okay, so that's going to be good.
20 minutes. In the next 20 minutes, we'll get some of our first data from that.
Yep, so we'll see what happens with what they find. It'll be certainly quite interesting to see what they do find in there.
I have a question about the latest spaghetti model, Strat.
Yeah, what about them?
Any chance you could bring them up in some stage? I'm just responding to a question from the chat.
I need to see if I can find them. Here's the thing with it. The 18Z model runs, the spaghetti plot's the same thing we saw earlier in the stream. But the one that I showed doesn't show the GFS one. I think the one Tom's program doesn't have it either. I want to see the GFS, the ensemble one updated because it shifted significantly west and south from the previous run, the parent model. And I want to see how the ensemble models did as well, because at the previous run, the 12Z run, only a few showed a landfall, and I'm pretty sure a good chunk more show that now. So I'm very intrigued to see that. The other potentially more notable thing further down the line, if you go to the long-range forecast, that could be very important, is that the 18Z GFS shifted the forecast track south by at least 50 miles for the same time period, around 100 hours. Once we get towards the 4 to 5 day chart, what could be pulling this thing to the north and east is a trough. If this stays further south, that trough's going to struggle much more significantly to be able to pull it back out to the north and east. So if we're in a scenario where that happens, this could potentially, way down the line, 5+ days, be a threat for other parts of the coast as well. But we obviously can't look that far out because we've seen how volatile the models have been just in the past 24 hours or so. And that doesn't even include, look at the cone of uncertainty 5 days out. The standard deviation is 205 miles or so, and 33% of the time it can go outside of that cone as well. You have to keep that in mind too.
I will be able to get the 18Z GFS on the screen shortly for you, and we'll be able to take a look at that together.
Yeah, because the only ensemble runs I have are from the 12Z for the GFS. Around the 18Z ones that probably come out by now.
A shift like that is quite significant. You said 50 miles, right?
It looked to be at least 50 miles just from the naked eye look. It could have been potentially more, actually.
Well, if that's the case, then that's something definitely to watch for, especially while the rest of the data from the upper level reconnaissance mission comes into all the models. It'll be a very interesting 12 to 24 hours.
Yeah, because the 12Z for the same time period, 6Z at Thursday, September 5th, for example, shows the storm just off the coast of the North Carolina, South Carolina border, a bit further south than that. The 18Z shows it well further down south, more than halfway down the state of South Carolina, closer to Georgia, actually, than North Carolina.
Yeah, that's...
So a shift like that's very significant. And if you look at the, let's say, for example, the 96-hour mark, or the 90-hour mark on the current GFS from the 18Z, which is 12Z on Wednesday, it shows it probably less than 100 miles offshore of significant sustained winds.
We've got a depiction of that on our screen now.
And the 12Z is further out.
Recon data. Apparently, they found one of the recon just went through the eye, and they found an extrapolated pressure of 942 millibars. as well as a peak surface wind of 124 knots in the northeastern quadrant.
Well, that's not much different from what it was.
Was it peak lowest peak flight level pressure looks to be 941.5 millibars. We've been noticing those that the strongest part of the storm that they were reporting reconnaissance earlier could have been the northern side, rather than the northeast from some of the trends I was seeing earlier. So I'm interested to see when a pass comes through there to see what that shows at that point, or just the next pass in general as well to get some better data, because obviously a very intense storm at this point in time. You want to try and make sure to get the most accurate data possible.
But that initial data suggests that it is only maintaining intensity and not intensifying. I said there, was sort of sounded a little bit disappointed. I'm not. We don't want it to intensify, but it's a of confusion, because it certainly looks better than when it first got the 150 miles an hour.
Well, I would say in terms of direct eyewall, the northeastern and northern side look to be some of the more fragile, potentially, even though it's all got serious convection wrapped around it. I do want to see a north to south pass, or a northwest to southeast pass as well, to get some better data on potential wind speeds, because the convection on those sides looks to be more significant at this point in time. I mean, regardless of that, so we're still looking at a extremely powerful cyclone, 150 miles an hour right now by what we're going at. And, 10-mile-an-hour difference in that regard isn't really going to make much of a difference, especially for the Bahamas, which are most certainly going to be impacted at this point in time, and potential loss of life and property, and just, how many lives are going to be changed. The 10-mile-an-hour difference isn't what people there are going to be caring about.
Yeah, it's regardless of what happens at this point, 10-mile difference is not that significant. It's already a major hurricane. It has all the power and all the potential to be extremely devastating for the Bahamas.
Now, Strat, we were going through the GFS model just before as well, and I've got it on the screen now too, so we can talk about this more.
It looks a lot further west than the 18Z and the 12Z runs, the new model runs that have come out. I don't know, you had the RAM scatter plot, one of the models. It looked, that one looked significantly further west than the 12 and 18Z ones, if you could potentially pull this up for comparison eventually.
What you can see, though, on that GFS is that there is no landfall on the US at all. But those purple areas, that's strong gales, 50 knots, affecting the whole Florida coast, just north of Port St. Lucie, all the way across Florida, probably all the way across Georgia, all the way across South Carolina, all the way across North Carolina along the coast, up to the Outer Banks, possibly beyond. That is a lot of area that is getting impacted by potentially destructive winds.
Yeah, and I would say also, if there's a chance you could pull up that earlier, the RAM model scatter plot, I think it showed the 0Z ones. That's, at least from earlier, the 12Z runs that we were looking at, and 18Z runs earlier, pretty significant shift to the west. So for people that were starting to say, oh, Florida's safe or whatever, maybe a bit too soon to say such thing. You have to remember, Florida, of course, is still in the cone of uncertainty, and a landfall doesn't mean, just a not direct landfall doesn't mean terrible impacts won't happen regardless. If you could pull up that RAM model plot, that would be absolutely awesome, because I think it's very telling to show just how uncertain the models are right now.
Well, there's two that we can show. One of them we just passed on the screen over here. You mean this one?
I gotta wait for it to pop up on the screen.
The one that usually appears on the stream.
That one, yes. That one.
So there's this. That's 6 p.m. UTC.
I think there was a 0Z one that was there as well, though.
No, not for another hour.
No? Oh, okay. Yeah, but I'm very curious to see the 0Z ones, because this looks to be a bit further west than the 12Z ones that we were seeing earlier in the day.
The 0Z won't be out yet.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that, though. I'm very curious to see what that shows up.
What I can also show you is another depiction on the screen here from the RAM model guidance. It's the graphic that we often use on our updates. You can see here what the models are saying there as well. It also tells us what's expected of the conditions around the storm, whether they get favourable or more unfavourable. Interesting to see that the HMON has a bit of a wind shear peak during the early hours of tomorrow, which might just make a big difference. But generally, wind shear remains below 15 knots. That's favourable all the way up until the end of September 3rd, which is Tuesday. Sea surface temperatures remaining very warm. I find it very interesting. That's why. So you'll see there HWRF and HMON taking it further west, but that also means colder sea surface temperatures off the coast of the US, and that might also contribute to the storm weakening. If it stays further out at sea, it's more over the Gulf Stream, and sea surface temperatures from the GFS and the CTCX there remain much warmer. Doesn't actually appear to do much in terms of the storm's intensity. That, well, actually HMON does take it down to a minimal hurricane by that point. It is hugging the coast. Relative humidity is nearing 60%. That will peak on Monday before starting to decline a little bit again. By the time we get to the middle of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, conditions really start to turn against the storm, and that's really going to finish it off eventually.
But what I will say, though, at least in terms of, it looks like regardless through all this, there won't be wind shear too much of an intense level. None of the models, no matter how close they get to land, show shear at any point within the next 5 days, I don't think, from what we can see on the stream graphics, above 20 knots. 15, of course, isn't necessarily favorable for any intensification, but from what we've seen from the storm so far and any shears encountered in the past, 15 knots wouldn't necessarily be enough to deter it or weaken it drastically either. Feels like the things that would weaken it most directly would be the land interaction and potential dry air and cooler sea surface temperatures.
So we've heard about one recon pass that's got pretty much the same as what we're giving the storm right now. No indications of Category 5 or anything like that?
Not that I see so far. It's looking like I'm still seeing data that looks like high-end Cat 4.
Well, that's
Which
something.
is very fortunate.
That's something. What is not so fortunate, and it's going to worry me more and more every hour that we see that this storm is still moving at 8 miles per hour, that means that the storm is going to move further and further west if it does not slow down. In the last 2 hours, up to 10 to that's 30 minutes ago now. But in that period up to then, it had moved at 8 miles per hour, so it is still moving at 8 miles per hour. And as long as that is continuing in a steady west-northwest direction, it's making a beeline for the northern Bahamas Islands, and then possibly on towards Florida if it doesn't slow down. It should. It really, really should. But I'm just sort of secretly hoping that the storm slows down even sooner, and then maybe just the Bahamas get spared the very worst part of the storm's eye wall.
Yeah, because right now, I don't know if the satellite temperature of the eye has changed at all, but we're still looking at a very impressive eye overall that's maintained itself pretty spectacularly throughout the past over 24 hours now at this point in time.
15.
15? That's a bit warmer than earlier. I thought we were at 14 a bit earlier. Or 13.
Yeah, we were. It is a bit warmer.
Yeah, so continually being concerned with the situation.
Just seeing if we can get any more imagery on this as well. Actually,
and if you have any questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Strat.
No, I was going to say, if anyone has any questions in the chat, because I know there's a lot of you watching, start your messages with Force13 all in text or at Force13. Lights up the message in a bright orange for us to see. Someone asked, how many people are going to be affected in the Bahamas, really? Well, it really depends on how slow the storm gets, how quickly. Right now, the northernmost Bahamian Islands are probably going to get hit very hard with a potentially direct landfall from a powerful Category 4 hurricane.
The
with
Abaco
potential
Islands
50
have a population of 17,000, so that whole population could be affected by major hurricane force winds. 15-foot storm surge. Not a great day.
Yeah, that would not be good.
No, definitely not at all.
And then you've got Grand Bahama, which could also get, major hurricane conditions, a landfall. Population there, 51,000.
Yeah,
Most
and
of them,
then,
of course, in
Nassau
Freeport.
Yeah, and then Nassau could still see some adverse impacts as well in terms of some rainfall, winds, rough waves too. But fortunately, at least for the size of the system, it doesn't look like Nassau
Yeah.
at this point in time get the roughest impacts from the storm.
Doesn't usually work as a rule, but for this storm it does at the moment. The tropical storm wind field is pretty much the same size as the cloud field. So anywhere under green, yellow, red, you'll get tropical storm force winds or higher.
Which, at least for the most northern Bahama Islands, is very bad news at this point in time. But for Nassau in particular, the largest island, that could be a benefit.
I'd be surprised if Nassau got tropical storm force winds.
Yeah,
Might get
something
tropical
needs to
storm
change.
force gusts.
Some people in chats earlier were trying to talk about a potential southwestern jog on the ECMWF model, but that just hasn't really verified in any of the parent model runs. I would only become very concerned for NASA at this point for more direct impacts if the storm continues to move further west than forecast or at a quicker speed, or if the newer model runs that come out in the next 24 hours show a more significant change in the track back to the west.
All right, interesting. So I guess we've calmed down from where we were at the start of the stream at 5 p.m. Whether we're in the midst of a potential intensification phase, and we're thinking, well, could be on its way to Category 5 now. But recon and satellite seems to be showing that the storm is only maintaining and barely doing that really at the moment.
Yeah, one of the planes is currently going through the northwestern eye wall, so we'll see what they get shortly.
A question, and interesting answers we've heard from this. Will the Bahamas have any effect on the intensity of the storm? Now, we were speaking to Thomas in the first hour or two, and he thinks there is the possibility, because the storm is so small, that the islands could have a bit of an effect on it. Does anyone agree with that, or disagree?
Well, I mean, the HMON 12Z run put it directly over both Grand Bahama and Freeport, and it drastically weakened the storm in its model run from a powerful Category 4 to a minimal Category 3 as a result of it. Whether or not that happens is yet to be seen, but if the storm, at least for the people in that area, unfortunately goes directly over them for extended periods of times while moving very slowly and stalling, for those direct land areas, that could be absolutely devastating. But in terms of intensity for the storm, if the exact eye remained over land for extended periods of time, that could contribute to possibly weakening it a good amount. Although you have to keep in mind that those landmasses are relatively small, so at the same time, you don't see, the same drastic 3 to 4 category weakenings that you see from Hispaniola, for example.
Yeah.
But you could still see some impacts.
Yeah, the main reason why I'd say it could be at best hit or miss is that not only are the islands that Dorian is most likely going to pass over are relatively small, but they're also relatively low-lying as well, which it's not really shouldn't be too much when it comes to, relatively speaking, when it comes to the storm's size and the very warm waters that'll surround it.
This is Force 13 Live. We're still watching the progress of Hurricane Dorian, which has a well-established eye, an eye wall that continues to sustain itself, and still a trajectory taking it right towards the northernmost Bahamas, which are pretty much guaranteed to get tropical storm force winds. And if it continues to move at 8 miles per hour, and we use that guide that the cloud region is just about the same as the tropical storm wind field region, if that also continues to move at 8 miles per hour, it will get there in about 12 hours. That's interesting. The National Hurricane Center think that the tropical storm force winds might be able to happen a bit sooner than that. So just want to put that out there. It could arrive earlier this evening. Let's get another satellite view. Water vapor right now as we hear back from Strat again.
I think there was just a new recon pass from the northwest right now. It's just updated. Devin put it in. I want to see if I can take a look at that quickly. Let's see. The northwestern eye wall, unless something sharply different happens in the very next update, as it directly crosses the eye, is not showing Category 5 flight level winds either. So that's good news as well, at least for now. I'd want to see how that holds up briefly in the near future when the next update comes in, probably within the next few minutes, to show it crossing through the eye, to see what kind of information we get from that. And then the other one that went from the southwest to northeast pass, still showing a significant tropical storm force and hurricane force winds extending a pretty good chunk away from the center at this point in time, maybe a bit further than the previous estimates were saying of 25 miles to the northeast. Yeah, this could be closer to 30 to 35 or 40 at this point in time. I'm not really the best at reading out this exact thing, but it looks like it's... but just looking at the latitude, longitude of the chart that the map is on, it looks like it's definitely further than at least 25 miles from the center at this point in time, at least on the northeastern quadrant.
All right, any comments or questions, send them in live. We will field any questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, as several people have done. How many new storms in the Atlantic will form this week? That's a good question. National Hurricane Center have a 60% chance for an area of interest that's emerged off the coast of Africa. That one will probably form. The one in the Gulf of Mexico is a much more of a toss-up, more likely not to form at the minute. There is an area of interest just off the Yucatan Peninsula right now, and it's expected to move west. Models are also indicating that there could be another system behind the one that just emerged off Africa, and that one could also form as well. We are entering September. It is prime time for some of these Cape Verde type systems to form.
And I think something we also haven't mentioned is that there's 2 tropical cyclone formation alerts right now.
Yes, Western Pacific.
In the Western Pacific, both threatening land. One is looks like could threat Luzon as a somewhat significant storm, maybe passing to the north, maybe hitting it. The other one looks like it could be impacting very similar areas in Vietnam and southern China, where Podol did not even last week, 2 days ago. So monitoring those
feels like last week.
I know, it feels like it's so long ago, but like at the same time, this was completely relevant until 2 days ago. I'm looking at the models quickly. Fortunately for the Philippines, at least, they show that that 90W will actually loop around and away, fortunately, which is good news for them.
All right. So that is a brief snapshot of what else is going on around the world right now, which we are only giving slight little mentions to every now and again, because the main feature tonight is Dorian, of course. More questions?
And also, sorry to interrupt, just with 92W, if it forms, it could pose somewhat of a threat to the Philippines as a smaller system, but with the current model runs, it looks like it could actually pose more of a threat to Taiwan, northern China, and potentially Japan and Korea down the line. So in terms of development and tracking that for the future, we're definitely going to have to monitor that as well.
All right. Let's just... In fact, is that new? The Eastern Pacific disturbance now up to 90% in the next 48 hours?
I think it was saying that earlier as well. I'm not sure if they just updated it to something
They are
new.
due to update any time on that. So
yeah, let me see what time that was. This was as of 5. Oh no, this is just updated.
That has
90%,
just updated.
90% next 2 days, 90% next 5 days. So
we also got new recon data.
Yep.
And a surface level wind of 143 knots.
Interesting.
That can't be. Wait, is it? Hold up. I was looking at the
Well,
wrong-
who knows
I
what
don't see
whether
refreshed yet. That might be 10 seconds. I'm not seeing an update on the recon yet. I want to see it pass through and see if that's contaminated or not.
we'll
I
have
want
to
to see
see
the
on
graphic update to see what
SFMR.
kind of pressure it got. Yeah, I'd say wait maybe another 10 minutes. I just want to see this update because it's very vital information that's going to be used not only in the National
Yeah,
Hurricane
if we're
Center
gonna make a
update,
Category 5 call right now, we gotta be completely sure
Yeah.
about it.
yeah, we don't want to just see what's happening for the advisors.
You
well,
know
but
what,
this
Strat?
information will also be going into the computer models.
You know what, Strat?
Yes?
We're gonna push off to a short break here whilst you figure that out. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that was 10-second SF.
This is Force 13 Live. Hurricane Dorian, a Category 4, high-end Category 4, or is it? Let's get back to the team and the latest from Recon.
Yeah, I'd like to go over this really quickly because that updated information did come through. They were, it looks like the northwestern eyewall is the strongest actually, or the northwestern one, because there were 30 seconds of sustained Category 5 flight level winds, and there were 30-second SFMR readings of 140 knots or above. 2 of them were contaminated though by high rain rates, so they could be overestimated, but 1 looks to have not been. You have to keep in mind those are only 10-second winds, so you can't just take 1 dot of those to heart and say, oh, this is a Category 5 storm. I'd want to see more recon pass consolidated.
Wow.
The other thing that's frustrating is that the pressure readings actually cut out in the eye, so we don't actually see direct pressure readings in the eye. But near the eye, under hurricane force flight level winds, the pressure was 942.5 millibars. So the pressure could be lower than what we're getting indicated right now. This could potentially be 940 or lower if we were to have a proper update. That's very frustrating to see the pressure cut out like that in such a crucial moment. But based on this, you could make an argument to push this to 155 potentially, based on the flight level readings.
The National Hurricane Center will be offering another update in less than 25 minutes, we hope. They'll probably be waiting for as much information from Recon as possible. I doubt they'll change very much in their intermediate advisory, which is coming up pretty soon. I don't think they're going to change it.
Yeah, they might not, but I mean, at the same time, though, 5 miles an hour at this point isn't really going to make that much of a difference. It's still an extremely powerful and destructive system if we're to impact land at this moment, and it will be an extremely powerful and destructive system tomorrow and Monday when it starts impacting the Bahamas as well. We can go privy to detail about such a small difference in intensity, 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, for a category change that write it down and make it super popularized by broad media and more people in general, just generate extra attention. But that doesn't change how dangerous it is, really. We already know it's a very dangerous and life-threatening storm that can change the lives of countless people.
How are conditions going to be in Orlando is a question that we receive here. Orlando is still on the very edge, near the edge of the forecast cone. That means the center of the hurricane could still track directly over, although it is rather unlikely. Tropical storm force winds, I would say, are very likely. Hurricane force conditions, probably not now. But rainfall totals, it depends just exactly how far west that storm goes. It could be anywhere from 2 to 6 inches. Also, what kind of maximum rain totals do we expect for the Bahamas? Up to 25 inches, according to the National Hurricane Center, Strat.
What's the maximum rainfall you're saying for the Bahamas again?
Up to 25 inches.
That is
isolated
absurd.
amounts.
Yeah, because we have to keep in mind this is potentially be stalling over the same area for a day or so, really. Is there a CDPS based on that for Freeport?
I think it's only a stage 6. Only a stage 6. It's still very high.
Yeah. We say a stage 6, but the categorization for them is absolutely devastating still. Was the main thing contributing to its CDPS rate not being absurdly high right now is probably the size of the system, if I'm not mistaken.
The size of the system really keeping low that score. Small. Even the most intense storms, Hurricane Patricia wasn't a stage 10 on the scale. It's a 10-tiered scale, by the way. Patricia was stage 9. Haiyan was stage 9. Because mainly for Haiyan's reason, it was moving rather quickly and didn't actually produce huge amounts of rain. Not as much as we're talking about in this instance even. And Mankut was a stage 10. That was because it was really large. Dorian will not get to stage 10. Currently stage 6. I think it was stage 7 yesterday or the day before. It could still get to stage 7 just before landfall. But it certainly won't get higher than that. Well, I don't know actually. I shouldn't say certain, because if the wind field does expand enough, it will expand a little bit. If it does maintain a lot of intensity, maybe, against the odds, definitely, but a major hurricane landfall in South Carolina, that could be a stage 7 or 8.
Yeah, definitely have to keep an eye on that. We're looking for the new model runs to start trickling out in less than an hour now. I'm very curious to see if there's some more model consensus shift back to the west, like the 18Z GFS run. I'm very intrigued to see if something like that happens, because monitoring that for potentially a new shift back to the west to reinvigorate conversation will be vital to monitor.
Well, the eye is looking very good again. It's having a third flush at the moment, it would seem.
Yeah, there's another new burst of convection trying to fire up, correct?
Yep, the eye temperature now, I think, still 15 degrees. Just checking to see if there's any higher than that.
Yeah, these negative 70s trying very hard to wrap all the way around the eye right now. Almost there once again.
One of the reasons why we're so fixated on that eye temperature is because a warmer eye usually means a stronger storm, and we watch out for those cloud tops. The colder the cloud tops, Strat was talking about into the minus 70s Celsius there, the colder they are, the higher they are, and that typically means the stronger the storm, especially if there's a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly. We need to monitor that very closely.
I'm looking at latest imagery on another screen here, and it is looking very good in latest frames. There is minus 70-degree cloud tops. What have I done? I've done something wrong on the screen. Minus 70 extending at least halfway around the storm at this point. With a temperature, well, the peak height of those cloud tops up to about minus 74, which I don't think we've seen before. So minus 74, minus 70 most of the way around, about halfway. So we're talking probably 155 here.
I'd have to agree.
Yeah, I'd have to agree as well.
Yeah, seeing the flight level winds.
If
and,
it sustains.
Conversion.
That is the biggest,
If it sustains,
massive key point. If it
Yeah.
sustains.
I think what we can take though is that there's over 30 seconds sustained flight level winds of Category 5 standing, and that could be enough to kind of push the conversation to re-up to around 155 miles an hour if that's what we really want to go with. The frustrating thing that could have helped us confirm such an intensity boost is that the wind pressure for the center of the storm during the eye cut out during the Mission 25 pass of the center.
Yeah.
So the last thing that we had was a 942.5 millibar pressure reading at hurricane force flight level winds.
Well, they also
So
dropped
we
the
could
drop
be
sound,
930s flight level.
which indicated 941.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see if when we get more data in from that, if we find a actual pressure drop to below what we were saying at the start of the hour of 942 millibars.
They just. I'm sorry to interrupt here, but the NHC has just released their intermediate
about that.
advisory. 150 miles per hour.
Still
941.
941
millibars.
now.
Still west at 8 miles an hour as well. Due west, not west northwest. Due west.
And you can tell by the NHC's language, NOAA and Air Force Hurricane Hunter aircraft reaffirm Dorian's Category 4 strength, so they're not thinking that it's going to be a Category 5 anytime soon by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
we were saying, the whole discussion of, whether or not it's the Category 5 and stuff, at least from, and probably the perspective of many others here concerning the type of threat this brings to land is mostly semantics. We're much more concerned about
Yes, sure.
the threat of loss of life and property for thousands and thousands of people that a extremely powerful Category 4 storm, no matter the intensity of stalling, potential rainfall, storm surge, winds, flooding, landslides, mudslides, whatever, can bring to tons and tons of people, to say the least. There's not really any fancy word I can say other than tons, because there's just so many people that could be impacted by this storm, even if it's relatively small. People say, oh, well, one of the islands in the Bahamas that's impacting only has a population of 17,000 people. That's not big of a deal. But that's still 17,000 people whose lives can be changed forever. Barbuda, for example's population was less than 2,000 permanently, and 2 years ago with Irma, everyone that was a permanent resident of that island had their lives changed forever. So,
And I imagine that we're thinking about, well, we're talking about the Bahamas, the economy. There must be a lot of tourism on these islands. I don't know which islands in particular, but
Yeah, I bet.
that is, I assume, the biggest part of the economy in the Bahamas. And if the storm goes and wrecks the islands, then that ain't going to be so good for their future.
Especially for the areas around Freeport.
I mean, I know, our top priority is, personal issues for people and, trying to sustain themselves and stuff for the storms. But, you also have to consider in these kind of situations for a country as a whole, the economic impact it can have as well.
Absolutely. So if you just missed that news, Dorian now has a pressure of 941 millibars, according to the latest National Hurricane Center update, 8 p.m. Eastern Time coming up. 150 miles an hour still. Their position 26.2 north, 74.7 west. A hurricane warning remains in effect for the northwestern Bahamas, excluding Andros Island, a hurricane watch for Andros Island, and a tropical storm watch for Deerfield Beach to Sebastian Inlet. We're still looking at that satellite imagery, watching like a hawk whether those minus 70 cloud tops continue to wrap around.
Yeah, it looks like at least in the 1 minute imagery right now, the past few minutes, there's been a blow up right around the eye in the northwestern quadrant that's going to try to wrap around. It's kind of like a cat and mouse game right now.
Well, we are looking at it under such a microscope. We didn't,
Exactly.
Decades ago, we wouldn't have had this because satellite imagery only came out every 15 minutes, or if you go far back enough, every 3 hours. And now we have, for the last 2-3 years, we've had this 1 minute imagery from GOES 16. And it is so easy to make knee-jerk reactions. It's so easy to think that something's going on when we're really got to wait to see whether the trend follows what we're looking at. And at the moment, the trend strat and everyone else, I would say, is that it is very much about the same.
Yeah, I mean, since the start of the stream, we've been kind of seeing a cat and mouse game with these colder cloud tops kind of starting to flare up on the western side and trying to chase around the rest of the storm to link up with each other. And so far, just haven't really fully completed that. Although it looks like, again, at this latest run, with this very new burst up on the northwestern eye wall, that's trying to complete that finally. But, for all we know, it could just not fully link up, and we could be seeing this cycle again for the next several hours as well.
Days.
Yeah, potentially. We could be seeing the next 24 hours plus. But, like been saying, a 10-mile-an-hour difference, of a storm this powerful is going to make a massive difference for potential impacts to land. We're always talking about the wind speed and everything. It's a Category 5 or a Category 4, and it's going to be this powerful. At the same time, to keep in mind, 90% of the deaths from tropical cyclones related from flooding, storm surge, rain, and flooding, and only 10% from wind and others. So, always classify the most powerful feature of a hurricane as its wind. But that's why, at least for us, I'm very thankful of Devin creating the CDPS scale, because it allows us to give a broader perspective of, potential damage. Sandy, for example, was the Category 1 at landfall, and it was still extremely devastating.
Something else that we're watching extremely closely is how fast Dorian is moving in its forward motion. It was moving at 8 miles per hour. I can tell you at the latest, it is still moving at 8 miles per hour. If it doesn't slow down, that favors a more westward track. We're wanting to see that mile per hour ticker drop from 8 to 7.654 as soon as possible.
And the other thing I'm slightly concerned about, at least for the track, if this westward trend continues, is that the NHC wants at least a slight move to the very slight move to the north to start almost imminently, and we're just not really seeing that at this point in time. So we'd want to see that happen very soon as well. At least a very start away from 270 degrees, which is due west at this point in time. We want to monitor that very closely as well as to keep an eye on those 0Z model runs that are probably going to come out within the next 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, so the next update from the National Hurricane Center will occur at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be the full advisory, and they might have some more information by then. How long do you think these recon planes will be around the storm?
Probably at least
I don't know, maybe
hours.
a few hours.
So they'll be there pretty much until the 11 p.m. advisory.
Yeah, one of them's going to be there at least for a pass or two longer, because one of them took off from Florida and took off later on than the one that took off from I think it was Louisiana or Alabama or Mississippi that it took up from. One of them took off from around Lake Okeechobee. The other one took off for at least a couple 100 miles further to the north and west.
One good thing about storms that are getting close to land is that recon are close enough on hand as well, and they can have more flying time inside the storm.
That is very true.
And we are still looking at it rather mesmerically as we continue to watch the cloud tops swirl around mainly the northwestern side right now, and the eye temperature still around 15 degrees Celsius. You can see the warm parts of the eye even rotating on that imagery. That is quite something to see. We are sticking with the infrared at this point as well, because I think the visible is all gone now too.
Yeah. If you have any questions that you want us to answer, there's a lot of you guys in the chat. I'm sure there's a lot of questions people want to have answered. Start your message with the Force 13 all in text, or tag us at Force 13 in text, and lights up the message in a nice bright orange for us to see. Helps us answer as many questions as possible. I think near the end of the hour, if we get a good amount of questions, we probably start to do some bit of rapid fire to get things out of the way quickly before the break.
And now we're looking at the geocolor imagery there on the main panel as well, showing the wider picture of what the storm has done in the last, that's 10 hours, I think. 10-hour loop, that. So you can see its progress, and its movement has been pretty much constant.
Yeah, other than a few wobbles, it's going pretty much due west. Someone asked a question, so faster equals further west and slower equals more north? Someone wants us to elaborate on that.
We think, because the more it lingers, the more likely that the ridge will start to weaken. So if it is moving more quickly, the ridge doesn't have much chance to weaken, and the storm will go headlong into the coast of Florida. But it may start to slow down soon.
Yeah, and someone else is asking, any storm surge warnings in effect?
No, not heard anything about that at all
tomorrow.
yet. I haven't heard a thing about storm
surge. Does the NHC only put those into effect for the mainland United States, or do they do them for other places as well?
They do, the mainland US.
Okay, they don't do it for non-United States areas?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No, no, they don't.
To answer that question, I don't think we're going to see any...
Otherwise, they'd have a storm surge warning for the Bahamas right now.
Yeah. But what is it? We're expecting 15 feet of storm surge right now?
15 feet.
Yeah, so there's definitely going to be storm surge. Someone asked, is the track of Dorian moving more west in the new GFS run? GFS, at least some of them will start trickling in some of the models within the next 20 minutes or so. So we'll be able to have an answer to that in the next hour.
Well, we hope.
So I'm asking, how bad will the storm surge be? We're expecting 15 feet now in some of the Bahama Islands. And especially for regions that are generally low-lying, that can be a major problem.
There is the graphic from the 8 p.m. intermediate advisory, and I might sense there that it's moved just a tiny smidge south of forecast so far.
It's moving south of forecast?
By a very tiny amount.
How many miles is tiny amount? 5?
I don't know looking at this map, but probably in the single digits.
Alright, well that's still a problem nonetheless.
I could actually get that answer to you as soon as I get the right tools loaded up on one of my other screens here to tell you. It could make all the difference, but there we are with the latest cone from the National Hurricane Center. We'll leave that up on the screen for just a moment or two whilst anyone else, the floor is open.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out for people that are potentially getting less interested in the storm because, the track doesn't show it on the coast anymore or making landfall. You have to keep in mind this is a cone of uncertainty, so the center of the storm can pass anywhere within this cone within any of this time frame. And 33% of the time, a third of the time, a storm passes outside of the cone as well. And, you have to keep in mind that the impact from the storm aren't just at the center, so it shows on the track. Even if it were to somehow be even further east than what it is right now, the storm could still be at a size where significant impacts could still reach onshore regardless of the mainland United States. And if it moves west of this forecast cone, well, you're going to see even more bad news for all of the southeast.
Actually, I think we've made a miscalculation. It is actually the opposite. It has moved about 1.5 miles north of the forecast track so far.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Very little difference. Not statistically significant, I wouldn't think.
Okay.
Not yet.
Asking, someone asked, they're watching the Weather Channel and they were showing recon data of Cat 5 despite the NHC going with Cat 4.
Well,
what do you think I think they were showing that the flight level data from reconnaissance was showing Category 5 flight level wind. It doesn't mean the storm has Category 5 intensity, though. Example where there was Category 5 flight level winds with outer storm being Category 5 strength was Jose, for example, 2017.
Well, some people
I'm just
people
giving
would
an
argue with you about that one.
Hey.
Well, I'm just giving an example of,
Not
in
me.
terms of
I
flight level
won't
to
argue with you on that one. I agree it was a Category 4.
And just an update, reconnaissance, one of them's about to do a north to south eyewall pass. Interestingly enough, 55 knot plus flight level winds extend all the way out from the cloud cover on the northern side, and even then some.
Really?
Yeah, so that's some interesting flight level data that we're getting there.
Wow.
And the other mission that did the initial northwest to southeast eye pass, picked up Cat 5 flight levels, is reaching the southeastern corner of the storm. It's probably going to turn to the left or right imminently.
So there we are. We're staying with 150 miles an hour for the time being because the National Hurricane Center have. We're sticking with those numbers. No reason why I think we should change at this point. But we are very tempted to pull the trigger on 155 miles an hour on our graphics, but we haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I'd want to see if there's under the next eye pass from recon north to south confirmed some sort of indication of closer to 155 miles an hour. Because you look at the SFMR readings, some reaching Category 5 intensity, but 2 of them are suspect because of high rain rates, and the other information is kind of cut out of it because that recon pass was looks like it had some of its data interrupted. The pressure readings were interrupted. For example, we didn't get a proper pressure reading because some of that cut out. So I'd want to see a couple of new passes to get some better confirmation of information before we really make any significant moves as well. Although the storm is looking very impressive on satellites, it looks like that these negative 70s might finally be fully wrapping around the center of the storm at this point in time.
Well, we're going to take a short break now here on Force 13 Live. We'll be back with more coverage into the next hour as we continue to decipher what is going on with this storm. Thanks for joining us so far. We hope you're enjoying it or finding it useful at the very least. We'll be back again in just a moment. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Coverage continues in a moment. You can also help the project become even better by becoming a patron. You can see more information about all the benefits involved by visiting patreon.com/Force13. With a special thanks to these people for being our most valued patrons this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colors wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description. watching Force 13's live streaming service. Force 13's live coverage continues as we track Hurricane Dorian, which is moving rather slowly towards the Bahamas at 8 miles per hour. If there is any good news from this storm, it would be if it slowed down, or if it weakened. A slowdown is more likely to mean a more northward turn. If it moves more quickly, it will most likely move closer to the coast of Florida. That's not necessarily a given, though. We'll see what happens in the next few days. It is a waiting game for many people out there, particularly on the Florida Peninsula. My name is Nathan Foy. Joining me tonight are several people, all the same people we spoke to last hour. Also joining us, though, is Devon, and I think Thomas is also there as well. Good evening to everyone.
Yep. I have been able to make it here for 8 o'clock.
Great.
Welcome.
A hurricane warning remains in effect for the northwestern Bahamas, excluding Andros Island. The hurricane watch is in effect there. And for Florida, a tropical storm watch has been issued for Deerfield Beach to Sebastian Inlet. We were wondering how long it would take until the Florida warnings went into place, the first watch. That did happen at 5 p.m. Devon, you've just joined us. What are your thoughts on the storm this evening?
The first thing that surprises me is that there's only tropical storm watches out for Florida and not hurricane watches. That's the first thing that caught my eye when I went ahead and pulled up this phone, because I would have thought for sure they would have popped out a hurricane watch yet. I don't know if they're waiting for the storm to come closer yet, or I'm not sure what they're doing with that. Basically, not much has changed here in the past 24 hours. 24 hours ago, Hurricane Dorian, extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane, heading towards the Bahamas and is supposed to stall over it. 24 hours later, Hurricane Dorian, a very dangerous Category 4 hurricane, going towards the Bahamas and is supposed to stall over it. So the message for the Bahamas really has not changed with that aspect. The models, they haven't really budged all too much since they did that easterly trend yesterday. So it seems like that the storm is still going to skirt along the coast of Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas. Perhaps maybe make landfall at one of those points. Obviously, landfall is not too important there. What is important is the other storm's effects. But basically, what the messages haven't really changed much from yesterday. Storm really hasn't changed much from yesterday. Just watching this storm continue to creep towards the Bahamas.
Thomas, you've also returned to us just now. Now, you've always been rather bullish about the storm. What are you making of what Recon are finding?
Yeah, I've been on the more aggressive side of things throughout this storm's entire life. I know Devin and I were chatting about this a little bit ago. But this
is a bit awkward.
So you believe Hurricane Matthew is a Category 5, correct?
Who, me?
Yes, you.
No, they're silent.
Why are we getting into this?
Well, no, because I'm going to try and justify my opinion here in a minute.
Let's stay on track here.
Okay, I'll stay on track.
Well, Matthew
I think
was a
it's
Category
155. I think it's at 155 miles an hour, but there isn't hard evidence quite yet. So I'm going to wait for more recon before I completely would make a call of that sort.
If this next north to south Iowa pass showed Category 5 flight level winds again, and maybe another unsuspected SFMR reading of Cat 5 levels, I would be inclined to go with the 155 miles an hour. The thing I'm most intrigued about is to see what flight level pressure gets as well. because the initial one had peak lowest flight level pressure of 142.5 millibars at hurricane force winds. Interestingly, we didn't get to see the pressure flight level at in the eye because that cut out for some reason. But the drop zone that just came in through AF 308 mission 25 showed a central pressure of 941 millibars. We are still deepening at this point in time. I want to see if the flight level pressure from this next north to south pass through the eyes in the 930s as well.
Rather interesting. So you think it's hovering around 940, maybe a little bit below?
Maybe. I mean, it's 941 right now from what we've seen, just because, you know, the drop zone actually went into the eye and they didn't screw it up for the first time in like 18 hours. So that's good news on them. But I did want to see if the flight level pressure was down in the 930s, which based on that surface pressure could have been. But it kind of cut out there for some reason, so the data didn't relay properly. So I want to see this north to south pass from NOAA mission 26 in through the eye to see if we have flight level pressure in the 930s. If that happens with another set of Category 5 flight level winds and maybe another unsuspected SFMR of Category 5 flight level, or not SFMR of Category 5 for 10 second, I would be pretty inclined to consider upping this to Category, not Category 5, Cat 4, 155 mile an hour sustained winds. But, you know, I want to see more data come in first before making any assumptions.
If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air for yet another hour, our live stream, by the way, we've been running full coverage. Well, we've had something on the screen at least for 27 hours at this point. We've been speaking for about 13 or 14 of those hours, and we will be continuing. But yeah, send in any questions. Have the models changed for Dorian?
Yeah, I'm wondering,
Not
did those
much.
0Z runs come out yet?
I don't think so. They won't come out for some time, will they?
I mean, usually the graphic ones, like, you know, like tidbits,
The
for example,
spaghetti
don't come out
models.
till, like, later on,
Perhaps.
but the spaghetti ones come out a lot sooner.
All right. Well, we will check on that. Just as I don't think they'll be out just yet. It has just literally ticked over to 0 UTC in terms of timing, but sometime in the next hour we should get some model information.
Yeah, and when that stuff comes out, it's going to be very, very important. It's been a bit of a westward shift. The spaghetti plot ones that we showed don't actually show the GFS parent one for some reason, I don't think. And
Yes,
that
it
one,
does.
they do?
Yes, they
Interesting.
do. I think it's GFVI, if I remember correctly. Let me look at this.
Yeah, because that was it. The ones I
Isn't
saw.
it AVNI?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
AVNI model.
All right, I want to see that on the 0Z because it looked like it shifted a good chunk to the west in the 18Z. I want to see if such a trend continued on. So
Well, I
that's
can
what
tell you,
wanna
it
monitor
definitely
very
isn't
closely.
out yet. So as soon as they come out, we'll let you know.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm just going to set things up there and see if we can get them soon. Do we think it will pass 160 miles per hour?
Hit it or pass it?
Pass
Did he say
is
pass?
written in the
Pass.
question there.
I doubt it.
Yeah, it
You
would.
know, I think we were talking about it last night. Devin said it last night. I think earlier today, and it, you know, makes sense that right around now, the next 24 hours is where we're probably going to see the peak intensity and fluctuations as eyewall replacement cycles begin to occur before general weakening trend as, you know, less favorable conditions start to pop up as we get closer to land. I think Devin's completely right when he said that.
I mean, we've reached that point 24 hours ago. The way that the storm has maintained itself through the eyewall replacement cycle that, if I recall correctly, ended up happening around 13 UTC today, ended up keeping its structure and ended up actually strengthening afterwards. So it's done a very good job with replacing eyewalls so far. So the intensity has not necessarily fluctuated as much as one would typically expect for a small storm, but the conditions are still there. The shear is still low, sea surface temperatures are still high, and you know, with a storm with an anticyclone such as this, you never have to worry about dry air. So conditions are right.
And just an update. Recon is about to do a north to south pass. There was another Cat 5 flight level bar reading. It hasn't passed through yet, but it's in the aisle right now. There was a Cat 5 flight level bar with the SFMR of over 140 knots. One non-suspected, one suspected. So I'd feel pretty confident if the flight level pressure, once we get past the eye again, if that's in the 930s, to potentially raise this to 155. But you still want to go with more data, of course.
Those two,
they're coupled together.
Those two suspect SFMRs are up in the 150 range.
Oof. Yeah, probably definitely hindered by rain rate.
Yeah, I think that's a little high.
No, it definitely is not going to be anywhere near that level. It shows, because the SFMR readings there are higher than the flight level when recorded. So, obviously something not up with that. But if we get the flight level pressure of 930s in the eye, then I'd be more inclined.
We've got a ton of questions. First of all, what was our longest stream? That was one question there. That was actually last year during Hurricane Florence and Man Cut, where we ran for 169 hours. Can we look at other systems around the world? Well, as soon as we can get a spare moment. Are we going to update the Harvey, Irma and Matthew tracks? No, they have already been done. How strong do we think Dorian will peak? Well, we've sort of discussed that just now. What type of eye does the storm has, apparently, is the question. Another question there.
What type of eye? If you can please elaborate on what you mean by type of eye.
I have no idea.
That I'll hopefully be able to answer that better. But
why
as far as I go ahead.
Why has Dorian not reached Category 5 today? Was it the little increase in wind shear?
Mainly because 29-degree sea surface temperatures, although warm, it is actually pretty difficult to have a Category 5 in 29-degree sea surface temperature waters still. So that's probably the main reason why, is that it's still, you know, it doesn't have enough energy to go ahead and get up there. If you look at the MPI values, the maximum potential energy values, they are hovering around 140, 145 knot.
So when we, and I hate to do this comparison yet again, but when we think of Hurricane Andrew and how it reached Category 5 before striking one of these islands, do you think it reached its maximum potential at that point? Or were the conditions just better for that storm?
No, it absolutely also reached its maximum, and Dorian is knocking right on the back door of its maximum as well. If Dorian ends up strengthening up here from 150, it's not gonna get much more than another 5-10 miles an hour. The conditions are great, but they're not perfect. We're not going to see, say, a 185 mile an hour monster come out of nowhere. We don't have the convection for that. We don't have the convective available potential energy for that. What we do have, though, is a Cat 4.
And just hopping on someone else's question here as well, do you think it will have, at any point, that it could develop another phase of moving more southerly, a southward component in its track?
Well, with storms as strong as this one, wobbles to the track are always prone to happen.
More than a wobble, though. You think there could be a sustained period, maybe 6 or 12 hours, where it moves southwest, say?
Honestly, I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that. But to say that it absolutely can't happen would be not a very smart thing to say. But I can tell you that, taking a look here, I don't see much evidence with dynamical model guidance suggesting that the storm will move to the south and west in the next 24 hours.
All right. Anyone else in our chat right now want to raise anything?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually really didn't know.
We're losing you there.
But I really don't think it was relevant to the discussion.
Okay,
so
sure.
we're having right.
All right, well, we continue to look at the infrared imagery right now on the screen, and I am continuing to watch extremely closely whether the storm might be moving just a very slight bit north of forecast, only a few miles at the minute, whether that trend continues or not. We're always looking out for trends. But let's see now. I'm just going to take a look and see if we can get a new eye temperature from this. We were looking at around 15 degrees Celsius earlier. If it's gone up any, then that is a sign of strengthening, and it's taking its sweet time trying to tell me what it is, so I'll just sit here and wait. I imagine it stayed around the same.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, we're waiting for the eye pass for pressure from the recon and the model runs to trickle out for 0Z. I think we have a lot of questions starting to pop in. Someone saying, can it move south instead of north along the coast? I'm not really sure what that means.
South along the Florida coast? No.
It says, can it just move south instead of north along the coast? I don't think that makes sense.
Well, what would need to end up happening is if it was going to move south along the coast, the first thing that would need to happen is that it would need to move north along the coast, loop back around, and then move south along the coast.
Oh, my word.
Again, I haven't seen any evidence of that occurring, and if that does occur, that is way further than 10 days out.
Yeah, I think what they're maybe referencing is what the doomsday forecast for Matthew were kind of saying with the long range ones, where it's like, oh, we're going to do a loop-de-loop after the Carolinas, come back down to Florida.
But
I remember that.
No.
NHC almost bought that, by the way.
Oh, they almost did.
They almost did.
Someone said, what's the width of the eye at this point in time?
If I
Everything's gone down for me at the moment, but the eye width is around 20 miles, slightly less.
For aircraft reconnaissance, they have a eye diameter of 10 nautical miles.
10? So it looks larger here.
Yeah, it's going to look larger on infrared.
Yeah, someone said, what are the
radar and microwave? It's smaller, typically.
Yeah. Okay. Someone's asking, what are the chances of this going into the Gulf of Mexico? If this was 3 days ago, we were probably saying almost over 50%. Today, we're probably saying near nil.
Still about 5 or 10%.
Really? It's outside the cone. If we were to do that at this point.
The cone
Cone's
is
32% of the time can go out.
Chance.
Yeah.
Well, the cone is a 67% chance, so I would say roughly 10% chance of the storm still emerging in the Gulf of Mexico.
It would have to go well out of the standard deviation to do that.
But, it would. Yeah. Let's just swing it back to that track map just for reference.
And someone's bringing up something that could be important. The eye is now visible on the NASA radar, so if we are able to pull that up, that would be
I did briefly get a snapshot from the radar earlier onto the screen, but it was glitching out something rotten, so I don't know if anyone else will have better luck with that. So that's a task for some of our team there. Can Dorian shift east of the cone and brush the coast with the eye? It certainly can. The Bahamas, I assume, you mean. I think we're falling quite far behind in looking through the comments right now. What are the chances of Florida landfall? Below half chance now. Probably still about 25%, 30%. Percentage chances of hurricane force gusts in Orlando. I'm not sure about that. Probably around 30.
Go ahead and look that up right now.
Maybe 30%. Hurricane force gusts, not sustained winds.
Correct.
What factors are being looked at to determine the likelihood of the storm slowing or stalling? Who'd like to answer that?
just to go back, hurricane force gusts for Orlando, likely in the range of 28%.
All right. So yeah, what factors are being looked at to determine the likelihood of the storm slowing or stalling?
Well, it
Alright.
all comes down to. Oh, go on.
Yep. So here's what's going on right now. The storm is currently being steered by a ridge that is currently to the north of it. And all of the dynamical models are currently expecting that ridge to all but disappear after 48 hours. And what ends up happening there is once that ridge ends up disappearing, since that was the main steering current, all of a sudden there is nothing to tell the storm a direction of where it needs to go. So due to drag, the storm is going to end up stalling. Just like pushing a car. If you end up pushing a car along the floor, eventually it's going to come to a stop. What ends up happening here is the same thing, is that you're applying a constant force, and then suddenly that force is disappearing, and now it's going to end up stalling. After the 3-day mark, the 72-hour mark, there is a trough expected to come up on the East Coast, and that is expected to pick the storm up, and that's why you see all the dynamical models move the storm northward after 72 hours. After that, it depends mainly on how strong the trough is to determine how quickly this storm gets pushed off to the north. But yeah, once we get past the 24-hour mark, the steering currents are expected to completely break down with this storm.
Gosh. And then it's going to be in no man's land, I suppose.
Yeah.
It will be in the literal definition of no man's land.
I mean, something that you could be concerned about far out, like 4 to 5 days plus, which is well within the realm of uncertainty. That's where the standard deviation starts to widen a lot, and you can go out of that as well. Is that some of the latest model runs have started to begin to show some weakness in that trough. That's supposed to kick it off to the north and east, away from the coastline after the Carolinas. So that's something you're going to have to monitor in the next day or two to see how that develops as well. And an update on recon, the iPass did happen. Flight level pressure bottomed out at 940.5 millibars, but that was not at directly 0 winds. So 941 millibars seems to be a proper pressure at the moment. We're going to have to see if that changes a bit. But that does, you get a very borderline case there for 150 to 155 at that point in time. So, continuing to monitor the satellite appearance of the storm and waiting for more data to come in is going to be very important.
All right, let's see if there's any more questions here at this point. What are the chances that the storm strikes Florida and move up the state like Irma did in 2017?
I mean, if you're looking at the GFS 4 days ago, that's pretty much what it wanted. It just wanted it to come in at a different angle. It wanted it to make landfall in northern Florida and then push up into the southeastern states of the United States. But obviously, everything's changed very significantly since then. We're still 3+ days out from any potential direct landfall, possibly. We're going to have to monitor things very closely. I am very intrigued to see any potential track changes, because things are starting to pop up. If the 0Z model runs shift again to the west, that we could start to be seeing a reversal trend that we need to monitor very closely in the coming days.
Another question there. What are the chances, this is quite important, of a tropical storm force winds along the Georgia coast, and is a Georgia landfall in the realm of possibility? It'd be a yes to that second question, although it is very difficult to get a storm to make landfall there. But tropical storm force winds pretty likely.
Yes to both of those questions. The Georgia coast is within the NHC cone, which means that there is a greater than 33% chance of the storm, at least the storm center, passing over the Georgia coast. Maybe not necessarily making a landfall there, but at least the center passing over it. as far as places along the Georgia coastline. Currently, Savannah, Georgia, with a 55% chance of tropical storm force winds. Kings Bay, Georgia, 64% tropical storm force winds. And Waycross, Georgia, 41% chance tropical storm force wind.
I can't remember whether those chances have been increasing. They must be increasing, right?
I believe they have actually remained relatively constant. If not, they've dipped slightly.
So we're left again with this imagery, the latest infrared, watching the storm live. The last image on this is about 4 minutes old. The latest eye temperature in the storm, am I still having difficulty getting that for you, it looks like? It was 15 degrees earlier, and by the looks of it, eyeballing it at least, it stayed around the same.
Yeah, you know,
13, I think.
I'd like
now.
to.
We're getting 13.
I'd just like to reiterate, though, that despite any slight change in intensity right now,
15 still.
140, 145, 150, 155, 160, that doesn't change that this is an extremely powerful and life-threatening storm that can change thousands and thousands of lives in the blink of an eye. We're talking about how close this is to Category 5 or whatever. We're taking every brief look at recon to see, is this getting stronger or whatever, and to kind of test things out. But we have to realize that isn't really what the whole thing is about. That's kind of just the point where people get really interested in the fanaticism over wind speeds and such. What we have to look at is how this is going to impact people as a whole, because winds aren't the only part of a cyclone. Rain, storm surge, flooding, mudslides, landslides, all of those are going to be absolutely massive problems. Just for example, for the Bahamas that we're looking at, low-lying areas, because they're islands, of course, we're expecting 15 feet of storm surge from this storm for many of those islands, and that doesn't even include higher waves and rough surf rip currents that are already occurring there that are dangerous for people as well. So when we're talking about Dorian and just storms in general that are threatening land, we don't need to just focus on how intense it is with wind speed or how low the pressure is. We need to focus on everything with it and how it can impact individuals.
Indeed, and that's what we'll keep talking about throughout the rest of tonight and beyond. It's going to be a slow thing, though, this as well, and it is a slow waiting game as well for those on the Florida Peninsula right now. Because we still don't really know what exactly is going to happen there. Tropical storm force winds, though, are still likely along the eastern coast, pretty much West Palm Beach all the way north. David, you got something for us?
I just refreshed the Facebook page due to, I think there is a requirement or cut-off point of 4 hours. However, there is a little bit of information. Air travel is likely to be severely affected regardless of the storm's exact track, and flights across the US could be delayed or cancelled. Airlines including American, Alaska, Delta, JetBlue, Frontier, Southwest, Spirit, and United have issued travel waivers, letting some affected passengers change their flights without any fees. So that's one news item.
Yeah, you're going to see probably within the next 24 hours to store a lot more of those kind of things come out. Not just for Florida at this point, but probably within the next 2 days, a lot of the stuff to start to come out for much of the Southeast as well. Travel companies offering refunds or switches around because of inconveniences because of the storm. That's going to be something that we have to monitor closely for any more updates.
All right, some more questions here, I think. I just lost some. I did find... Will the wind field expand is a question. And just how much do we think this wind field will expand? It must be quite difficult to forecast that. Talking about these eyewall replacement cycles that might happen, and the storm moving further north, they always tend to grow quite a bit as they do so.
I will say that over the next... Let me take a look here. Yeah, over the next 72 hours, it looks like that the growth of the storm that the NHC is projecting is pretty negligible.
Hmm.
They're really not expecting this storm to grow all that much. Let me see here. Yeah, the if anything, the hurricane force wind field is expected to grow, basically double in size actually, but the tropical storm force wind field is expected to remain relatively constant until the upwelling ends up happening and the weakening begins.
And the sooner that happens, the better. Probably not going to be anytime soon, though. We're continuing to track Dorian as it moves ever closer to the Bahamas. You can see some of those islands just off the storm right now. It's well within view if you're on those islands right now. We're back again in just a couple of minutes here. This is Force 13 Live, latest on Hurricane Dorian. Force 13 Live, continuing coverage on Hurricane Dorian as we continue to look at it on the screen here. Still maintaining its intensity by the looks of things. So little is changing or has changed in the last 24 hours. I'm certainly getting a little bit weary. I don't know how you guys feel watching it with me right now. But with me again for this section is the team consisting of David, Orlando, Strat, Sam, I think that is, Ryan, Devon, Thomas, and Justin. A full house here tonight in the studio. So I'm sure there's still plenty to talk about. What are Recon doing now, if anything?
Let me take a look real quick. The one that just did the north to south eye pass is reaching the southern periphery of the storm. Probably going to take a right to left turn imminently. The AF308 Mission 25 has taken a turn and is about to do a northeast to southwest eye pass. So within the next 20 minutes, we'll get more data on that, probably before the end of the hour. It's kind of interesting to know, unless something else different gets picked up on this recon pass from the northeast, the strongest eye wall is actually the northwest, which isn't very typical for cyclones at this intensity. We're typically expecting the northeast side to be the strongest, but if we don't see something different here, because the initial northeast eye pass showed not as intense as the northwest side, we're going to be looking at a different sector being the most powerful at this point in time. I'm also looking again for this eye pass to see if we get flight level pressure cracking below 940 millibars as well. That's going to be something else to monitor very closely.
I would also like to say that the drop ended up missing the eye again. But at the surface, it ended up getting 956 millibars with a wind speed of 128 knots.
It missed the eye wall again.
It hit the eye wall, missed the eye.
Hmm.
Okay, so they've really been struggling today to get these to drop into the eye.
Well, it's
And
small,
again,
isn't it?
this is
It's true, it's
again,
not- it
this
is
is a 5. It is. They're saying that it's a 10 nautical mile wide eye. So there's really not a very large window to get this drop zoned in. So it's definitely not an easy task for them, to say the least. This isn't Irma.
All right.
Yeah,
We had some more questions. Is the high pressure still north of the storm?
Yes, but it is weakening.
It's weakening. How and why do hurricanes begin? We're going very into the nitty gritty here.
I think that is a question better for a different time, but short and sweet. A disturbance comes off of the African, at least for the Atlantic, we get a disturbance that comes off the African coast. It ends up going over warm water, and as long as it's able to tap into the warm water to eventually get convection going, a low pressure can begin to form. And if the low pressure ends up getting closed, you've got a tropical storm. That's way oversimplifying it, but that's probably the deepest that we can go into it at this time.
Pretty much. Let's see what else we're getting. A lot of people telling us information as well by tagging us. That's sometimes useful. Do we think the East Pacific is going to remain relatively quiet for the rest of the season?
I believe there is an East Pacific storm that is at 90% right now, an impasse.
Yep, it looks like imminent development there is possible. I'm pretty certain within the next 48 hours, according to National Hurricane Center, we see some development there. And there's very heavy model support to go with that as well. And that doesn't include the Western Pacific, where we have 2 tropical cyclone formation alert things, which means within the next 48 hours, the JTWC expects 2 storms to form there. We've just been so focused on Dorian through the past couple of days that we just have kind of let everything on the wayside. And to keep in mind that both these tropical cyclones in the Western Pacific could pose threats to land as well. 92W to potentially the Philippines a bit before, potentially later down the line, Taiwan, China, Korea, and Japan, although, long range, that's kind of iffy right now. And then the other invest potentially to the same areas that Podal just affected with extreme amounts of rainfall as well.
David?
Nothing, Nathan, but still a dangerous system.
Absolutely. And again, the center of the storm could pass anywhere within that cone still. The center of Dorian's eye could make landfall near Palm Beach, Florida. Most likely won't, and it will probably just be off the coast, but could quite easily deliver hurricane force conditions to the Florida coast, and will probably almost certainly, no matter what, deliver tropical storm force winds to the coast there, and for parts of other states, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina in particular, and they could get hurricane conditions too, although that is further out, and we are, a little bit more in the dark on what exactly is going to happen there. Just a reminder of the hazards that are out there that could affect land. Hurricane conditions are expected in the hurricane warning area across the northwestern Bahamas by Sunday, with tropical storm winds beginning tonight. Tropical storm conditions are possible within the tropical storm watch area on Monday. A life-threatening storm surge will raise water levels by as much as 10 to 15 feet above normal tide levels in areas of onshore winds in the Abaco Islands and Grand Bahama Island. Near the coast, the surge will be accompanied by large and destructive waves. Dorian is expected to produce the following rainfall accumulations this weekend into the middle of next week. The northwestern Bahamas, 10 to 15 inches, isolated 25. Coastal sections of the southeast United States, 4 to 8 inches, isolated 12. The central Bahamas, 2 to 4 inches, isolated 6. This rainfall may cause life-threatening flash floods. Swells will begin to affect the east-facing shores of the Bahamas, the Florida East Coast, and the southeast of the United States coast during the next few days. These swells are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions. Please consult products from your local weather office. The next National Hurricane Center advisory will be out at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be running that, and the forecast graphic on this screen will update. Let's now run back over to the satellite imagery and see what we can see. Any new changes? Not really. It's just a tale of consolidation right now, but in general, you know, it gets hard to see the bigger picture when we keep looking at this mesoscale. It makes you start to get a bit blinkered, really, and you forget what the storm used to look like. Overall, it looks much better than it did earlier today, and it is hovering somewhere around 150, maybe towards 155 mile an hour winds. Any new recon readings that might substantiate that?
I'll just take a look again. No, nothing new. The northeast to southwest eye pass will probably be there by the end of the hour. I think you're completely right, though, saying sometimes it's good for us to take a wide shot. Are you able to pull up a longer scale imagery? Because I know we have the 1 minute right now. It's always important to see the development of the storm happen over time as well. These minus 70s are maintaining themselves pretty well, especially on the south and western parts of the system. So
I'll get it up there in a few moments.
We got to reiterate, very often, especially because, just looking at, iteration stuff, we're always going to have tons and tons of new people coming in and out of the chat and stuff, is that 10 mile an hour difference from 150 to 160 isn't going to really matter to us in terms of potential devastation. This is regardless of mediocre changes in official wind speed. This is still an absolutely potentially devastating system that will clearly change the lives of countless people among the northern Bahamas, and potentially down the line impact many, many lives in the United States as well. Go out and mention again that 90% of the deaths from cyclones are from rain. So rainfall, flooding, and storm surge rather than wind damage and others, which is the rest of the 10%. So, when we're looking at, fanaticism and, media coverage of how strong a system is, we can't forget that, in perspective, that's obviously important. But in reality, there's a lot of other things to focus for, like rainfall, like the size of a storm as well, because that can make huge impacts. That's why I'm really thankful that we have Devin and the CDPS scale to help us kind of get a better grasp on potential damage that we can actually see, rather than hyper focusing on what people could consider to be the most fanfare part of a storm.
I think we can just about bring to you a wider shot now, or soon. Well, there is an image. Okay, well that was earlier today. The frames are still loading, so as soon as that finishes up, we'll get that on the screen. That will be a view from GOES 16 over the course of the last 10 hours, and here it is now. This is how the storm's been progressing over that time period. In general, the red colors have been increasing, but you can see how it's been fighting there in the last few hours with those flare-ups never really sustaining for very long at all, and it's having to keep producing them to keep those cloud tops high right now. But this gets you a good idea of its general movement too. Pretty much in an arrow straight line right now, west-northwest.
Yeah, and just that latest imagery, you're seeing the trend as well. Those deeper reds continuing to surround the center of the storm at a more and more consistent rate, especially in the past several hours. Seeing that development is always a negative thing to see for people in harm's way. But it's good that we have the satellite imagery to continue to
something
see
else
what the potential intensities could be.
That I can now tell you is that in the last 2 hours at least, it's slowed to 7 miles an hour.
Okay, well that's good news.
We'll see whether that continues.
Eventually, can you see if that trend continues?
Still moving too quickly for my liking. Because it is still on a collision course.
Well, here's what's going on here. It's obviously still heading towards the Abaco Islands in Grand Bahama over there, and taking a look at the current forecast, it looks like that they're not only going to experience hurricane force winds, but they will likely experience major hurricane force winds for a time span that's going to be longer than 24 hours.
Really?
So,
No way.
it's not expected to weaken much at all as it passes through that area, and it's not going to be really moving anywhere. So, the major hurricane force winds, if it tracks right over Great Abaco and it tracks right over Grand Bahama, the major hurricane force winds are going to stay in that area for at least 24 hours.
It's a small panel here, but it's the only version that isn't glitched. Bahamas radar, the eye of the storm is now visible. And you can see some rainfall bands moving around there, affecting some of the other islands further south more than anything at the minute. The Abacos themselves, just one little rain shower that's pushed through there just northwest of Marsh Harbour. Nothing really significant just yet, at least it doesn't look like. But that is the first proper look at some radar imagery there. Now back to that very nearly instant satellite imagery here. This is 1 minute imagery from GOES 16. Continues to look better when you look at that compared to earlier today. Now the latest image on that is from 4 minutes ago, and it continues to look more impressive.
I've got an image from a half an hour ago, and it looks impressive. So, if it's improved even more in the last half an hour, then I would imagine it looks even more impressive than what I'm looking at right now. Because I'm looking at a zoomed-in full disc right now.
About the same as half an hour ago, but I'm comparing it to what we're seeing maybe 2 or 3 hours ago.
Oh yeah, big difference. Because like I said, I'm looking at the full disc, so I can see that big difference here.
Yeah. What were you talking about, Devin? Could you explain what you were mentioning in the chat? I just I feel like it's something very important.
Yeah. Well, what I've been trying to butt in on and say here is the fact that we've got a major hurricane that is expected to stall directly over the Abaco Islands and Grand Bahama here for at least a period of 24 hours. So not only are you going to be looking at the 15 to 25 inches of rainfall over these islands, but you're also going to be looking at major hurricane force winds sustained for a very long period of time, likely for a nearly 24-hour period of time, especially if you end up missing the eye. So it is going to be a very, very rough ride for the Bahamas, which will for the Abaco Islands and Grand Bahama, which is very likely to take a direct impact from Dorian here. Of course, the tropical storm force winds are going to start arriving tonight. If they're not there by morning, I would be very surprised. Eleuthera Island should already be experiencing tropical storm force winds sustained, from what I can see here.
Really?
They should be on the very edge of the outskirts there of the tropical storm force winds. They should be either just offshore or coming ashore there now.
Sorry to interrupt that as well, but there's some interesting things that the 0Z model plot, the scatter plot came out, and the general consensus has shifted west about 1 degree.
A whole degree?
Half a degree to a degree is what it looks like the general consensus westward shift has been from the 18Z to 0Z. Now, instead of being on the far western periphery of the model plot, let's see if I can get the RAM one as well, rather than just the tidbits one, so I can get as many of these as I possibly can. The largest difference is that now instead of just having the track of the NHC be on kind of the western edge, it's now closer to the center or a bit to the east. I'll show both because they're both very interesting and notable differences, actually. So let me pull the screen share very quick.
Please. We're just waiting for Strat to bring up his screen, and now he's done so.
Yeah, here it is first. Here's the tidbits. Arguably, the one it does show more models in general. You can see a pretty significant shift west in a lot of these models from the latest run. Now the official one is in the middle to a bit of east of the general consensus, around 4 days out at least, before a shift back, and it kind of centers out again. HWRF is going more aggressive with the landfall now as well. H1 shifting. The interesting one though is this one. There's a pointed shift to the west in these models, comparatively.
Oh
to
my,
the
HWRF.
Yes, and the CTCX as well. CTCX pointed shift to the west as well. I'm interested to see what the parent model, the GFS, comes out at 0Z as well. You see the official track is now way further to the east on this envelope than any of these are.
Yes.
The red one is the official forecast track. That's the furthest east now by
It's just so odd because, this morning, or last night, it was this morning actually, the official forecast track was the westward outlier.
Yeah, and it just goes to show with this storm, the models are just so uncertain with this, and that's kind of crazy considering 3 days ago we were, pretty dead set that we're going to see this thing make landfall in central to southern Florida coastline as a pretty powerful hurricane. We have to start prepping as much coverage as we can for there. To now where we're saying, oh well, a landfall in Florida is still a possibility, but the models have shifted way east. This could just not make landfall at all now in anywhere. To now we're starting to see another big shift back to the west again. And it is notable that a couple of these models still do show Category 5 on their forecast intensities.
The only model that shifted significantly to the west there is the HWRF. Everything stayed pretty much the same. Strat.
Really? I thought
everything stayed pretty much just the same.
Before it was not at this point in time on the chart.
I've got, I'm looking at the 18Z runs right now, and
they're not as far west as I thought.
Other than the HWRF, everything looks pretty much the same. I mean, I'm really, even with the 18Z model runs I'm looking at right now, the official forecast is the eastern outlier on this. So the fact that it's still the eastern outlier on that isn't really a comparison on that. So
if we can get an overlay, that'd probably be helpful.
And because you're looking at the HWRF screen there, you are looking at 18Z data though, aren't you, Strat?
Is this 18Z?
Yeah, that one is. The one before was 0.
Oh my goodness.
that is 18Z.
Oh my goodness.
That'll be the reason why.
That'll be the reason. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be the 0Z. Oh my God.
That is only an error that Strat could make. Yeah.
And
is this a Matthew? Sorry to break in here, but I was wondering if this is similar. Is this a? I'm sorry. Is this a? I was just wondering if this is in any way similar to a track that Matthew made, but by a stronger hurricane.
Okay. So
I'm sorry for
one thing that I can say here is that taking a look at those 0Z models again, with the exception of the HWRF, they look pretty similar to what I'm seeing here with the 18Z. If not, they actually seem to be a little bit eastward. Maybe it's the way that the models are plotted on tropical church bits as compared to RAL. I'm not 100% sure why there may be an illusion like that, but it looks pretty much the same, if not a little bit east.
The RAL data has just come out, by the way. We'll get it onto our screen in a minute or two.
Fantastic. And comparing this to Matthew, sure, yeah, you can definitely do that because Matthew paralleled the coast as a major hurricane. This is expecting to parallel the coast as a major hurricane. So yeah, that's an apt comparison. This storm will be a lot smaller, and I would probably say roughly a similar intensity, if not a little bit stronger, as it parallels the coast, if not makes landfall. But yeah, I think it's an apt comparison, definitely.
New recon data came in, but I believe there's a good portion, at least on tropical tidbits, that seem to be missing. For some reason, though, it seems as though that there's an indication of one suspect SFMR, and the maximum height on the graph shows up to 155 knots. So I'm assuming they picked up something around that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the northeastern eyewall also has a Cat 5 flight level barb. I'm just looking at the recon data right now. It does look like the northwestern eyewall was actually the strongest, though, because it had 3 Cat 5 flight level barbs. At least it's the most strongest at a consistent level. There is numerous missing data points, though, for this plane, the AF308 mission in, on SFMR readings, and there's no pressure readings at all in the past 10 minutes either. So that's completely gone.
Glad to know that the equipment on the AF308, along with the other Air Force planes, like, so glad that the equipment is just fully functional and is working exactly as it's expected. I mean, come on, these guys are probably still running Kennedy-era equipment in these planes.
Crazy.
Wow.
This is some of the worst times where you can have these kind of errors pop up because they're just
the Air Force planes are just running less great equipment.
Strat, I direct your attention to the live stream right now. The 0Z information from RAL is now on the screen, pretty much showing the same things what you were showing just now. I don't see much real difference.
Yeah, it looks further east to me.
Further east?
Maybe by a little bit, if there's any difference. The only thing that, like I said, seems notably further west is the HWRF.
Yeah, sure.
The HMON pulled eastward and is still noticeably slower than the rest of the dynamical models. In fact, the HWRF and HMON are both noticeably slower. Everything else is further north and east.
And the intensity models, for what they're worth, you know, I think the consensus has category 4 just about for 48 hours. Yeah, that's what the NHC is running with, so NHC is right with that model consensus on their forecast. So that's the latest on Dorian, new models that have just come out. The National Hurricane Center will do an update in 2 hours, a big update, a full advisory. In the meantime, we're left watching Dorian again, mesmerized by it quite often, as the eye wall continues. Looks like it is still developing. We could be seeing a stronger storm soon. Recon will hopefully tell us the answers that we need. Pressure down to 941 millibars if you missed it earlier. We'll be back again in a few minutes with more coverage. Coverage continues in a moment. You can also help the project become even better by becoming a patron. You can see more information about all the benefits involved by visiting patreon.com/Force13. With a special thanks to these people for being our most valued patrons this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colors wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description.